Hey, welcome back to the CRP. I'm Miguel Dorati, and we're looking at boxing odds with special guest Mike Davis. Mike Davis on loan from the Fighters Corner podcast. You want to check that out on YouTube and all the other podcasting outlets. Making a lot of waves, a lot of great interviews and stuff with some of the MMA old school. Mike, how you doing?
Smooth, man. We got a big weekend of fights coming up.
That's right. We're talking about the Staples Center, Saturday, September 28th. We're on Fox and Fox pay-per-view. And we've got the premier boxing champions basically bringing us Errol Spence Jr. versus Shawn Porter in the main event spot. Welterweight action with a couple of belts on the line and maybe a date with Manny Pacquiao at the end. How are you looking at this fight?
Man, well, first, I am glad. What do we live? 67, about 70, 80 years? For my life to coincide and cross paths at the same time that Al Heyman is alive tells me, man, I think the gods of combat sports, because this weekend is like the beginning. Like everybody talks about the heavyweights, the heavyweight division. This is kind of the guys that have made a name for themselves, finally like going from the caterpillar stage to the butterfly stage. Like the rest of boxing is gonna start taking off now. Like for the average Joe, they're gonna start knowing who these guys are. And this weekend, phenomenal place to start in regards to watching.
I agree with you. I think, when you look at it, the premier boxing champ is around, uh, I guess it would be their fourth year now. I don't, maybe I'm getting the numbers off a little bit, but from the very first year, from their inception, oh, they're going to run out of money. Oh,
They're
they
gonna run
don't
out
know
of
what they're
money.
doing. They're spending
Yeah,
out of money and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Second year, I'll tell you, they're bankrupt. They're already,
They just got their funding, but barely, It's not happening anymore.
now we're in year four, and we're getting Errol Spence Jr. definitely a PBC product. Shawn Porter, he had a reputation before he joined the PBC stuff, but now two world champions meeting, and I do think that this fight becomes a huge fight in basically boxing's second glamour division, right? You got a couple other world title fights here, but I think more to the point here for real boxing observers is you got to look at the fourth fight on offer here, which also happens to come to us in the welterweight division. And if you look at Porter and you look at Spence Jr., I'm sure that somewhere on their resume they've got either Josesito Lopez or John Molina Jr. Those guys have been putting in work for the PBC, and now they're facing each other on the undercard of a major card here. And I think that that's solid matchmaking. That's taking care of the guys who are on your roster and not just a top-heavy roster. You're also taking care of the soldiers under there. And I look at that fight, Molina Jr., he's fought some of the frontline guys and fallen short, so I don't want to see him in with the world champions anymore. But now against Josesito Lopez, they've created a legitimately interesting fight. And I think
That's an intriguing bout.
That's definitely one of those where what you're talking about is in full flower with the Errol Spence. But if you look under there, there's some nice mushrooms growing in the dark spots too,
Some good roots. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I listen. We've talked about it numerous times, whether it's publicly or privately. There's too many belts. There's too many alphabet belts going around. But if there was going to be a belt that doesn't exist that I would really want to, it would be the PBC belt, because the entertainment that they're giving us, I don't know. Like I'm starting to respect the sanctioning bodies less and less as time goes on. Like look at the last Tyson Fury fight, the Mayan belt. But I don't know. I wish PBC would have a belt, and this would be a crown jewel, to start it at. So
yeah, well, they haven't done it for this weekend, I don't think, unless we're going to get some type of surprise, and it would be a nice surprise. But
I think they just don't want to run into the the politics. I think they'd have a lot of issues if they started their own belt.
I think that in my estimation, if you look at what the PBC's done, I think that their full intent was to get the roster with the belts, have all the belts in a format where they're getting unified. And I think that the first guys that they ran that that wild card with was the British guy James DeGale and Batyr Jack. I was just thinking Bojack. I'm talking boxing history.
That's such a badass name, isn't it? Like
It is a
like in
Jack's
the
a
annals
cool
of
name.
boxing. That's a phenomenal name to have.
Yeah, so no, but Batyr Jack, and I think what happened there is they had it on the cusp, and when you get all the belts unified under one guy, then yeah, you can just say, hey, we're going to replace them all with one belt.
Yeah.
But the draws that wound up in that tournament and what they wanted there didn't work out for them, and now they're still looking for that first place. And that may come in the next step when they meet WBO World Champion Manny Pacquiao, at least for the winner.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm interested. Like the aspect that I like about it most is, you and I are fans of Olympic boxing, and you got a gold medalist in Errol Spence, kind of maturing, and even
No,
though
let's be clear. Errol, the black mark on him is he never
he
medaled.
never medaled,
Right.
Yes,
But he was definitely slated for one. Never happened, and then that's really the only bump in his career because
I think there was
before that he
scoring
was
issues,
a
though.
priceless amateur, a decorated amateur, and then as a pro, he kept the blinders on after the Olympic debacle and went pro and has been perfect ever since. So really, that 2012 Olympic team where everybody failed to medal.
What do you think that was?
Now we look back at it, I mean, how many British guys medaled? In England. Oh, that's odd. You know what I
That's
mean?
what I was thinking. It was more scoring than anything. I've been kind of. I mean, and I know this is off topic. I've been, dude. I've been watching Frank Tate fights. Why I don't know, but I've been like on just a tear. I've watched like 5 or 6 of his fights for the last 3 or 4 days, and it's weird how some of the guys in the Olympics here, like Michael Nunn. Here. You want to make a parallel for Errol Spence in the Olympics? Michael Nunn, did make the Olympic team, turns pro, and socks up everybody that beat him to get on the Olympics. And it was more politics than anything. So if I had to make an Earl Spence parallel, I would say in ring Michael second to none.
And Spence, has that reputation, and he's
High
a
output.
guy, and he's a guy with the pedigree and stuff like that. But he, even things like the rumored sparring session with Floyd, where either he dropped Floyd or whichever story you want to listen to there. But even that, adds to the mystique around him. And I think that's the right word for him. And then he's the strong, quiet type too. You know what I mean? So he doesn't talk a lot of trash. He's very confident in his I think he's a good presentation in terms of he also has that all-American kind of good guy kind of feel around him. Just being the best is enough. It used to be enough, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to trash talk. You don't have to do that sort of stuff. Spence embodies that stuff. I'm okay with him wearing an Olympic uniform and things like that. Guys like Mike Tyson, it's like, it turns out, maybe we wouldn't have wanted him carrying our flag kind of thing. I know he didn't, but you know what I mean?
Where people fail to really, when people, I mean, and I know we're kind of going all over the place here, but we're touching on Olympics, and we'll circle back, to the fight eventually. But like Mike Tyson was thrown off the Olympic team because he tested positive for steroids. Like 90s, they say was the greatest era of heavyweight boxing in a long, long time, and they were all juiced up. They just weren't testing for it. Every single one of those guys was juiced up. And, Tyson failed a steroid test at the age of 16 or 17. What is it? All of a sudden stop. He sees, the proper path to go down. And I'm not diminishing any of their accomplishments. But at the end of the day, why is this bout being held in California, Miguel?
Yeah, I mean, the
Why
Veda
not
testing,
Vegas?
the Veda testing looms above, clean sport looms above everything that we talk about nowadays. And again, it's just as we've covered extensively in other conversations, it's really a moot conversation. You're policing something after the fact. The bottom line is at the elite level, the athletes have the money and access to drugs that are not illegal.
Well,
They're
that
not on the they're not on the list. The lists don't include them, and they don't even know how to test for these drugs yet, because that's the cutting edge of science where these guys sit at the highest level.
well, let me counter you, and obviously you're correct. What about the aspirins and the ibuprofens and the creatines that you test positive for that you can't take when you're on that test? And I'm going to tell you something about Las Vegas right now. Las Vegas is in a world of trouble. They are allowing sportsbook all over the country right now. So the biggest allure for Vegas was the sports book and the big fights and the big stuff happening there. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, all that other stuff. Well, now that the sports books, you can go anywhere else in the world and do it. New York and California have taken all the big fights away from them. In fact, I would even say New York has done more damage than California. And, they don't want, let the athletic commissions do what the athletic commissions do. Is it a flawed system? Yes. But you know what? It is a system. The whole super duper drug testing, it should be agreed on by the participants, not the athletic commission. That's my personal opinion. They've killed the boxing and the combat sports industry in Vegas. Anybody that's questionable in combat sports, you just move it somewhere else. Yeah, we can't risk having this high end guy fight in Vegas. You can't risk it.
Yeah, I mean, times will change. Like I said, I don't think any of that is a situation where it's any different than it's been for the last 100 years, where people are chasing competitors and trying to figure out what it is that they're doing, for an edge, and deeming some of it illegal and stuff like that. And again, you mentioned, once you start including, the fact is at the end of the day, the boxing or the athletic commissions in the state report to the lieutenant governors.
The lieutenant governor. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, at that point you're in a bureaucracy, and the lieutenant governor has a heck of a lot more things to worry about than a little bit of combat sports. His tie-in really comes with his job as running the ATFs and the police bureaus, that if you actually had to shut down a boxing event being run illegally, you can make it happen by going through the hierarchy of so that's the connection on the government end, right? Now, how that makes these people care or be qualified to deal with anything that is actually pro sport or sport related, is beyond me. And the bottom line is they include things like ibuprofen and marijuana and things like that in that, because at the end of the day, it all becomes a report to a lieutenant governor that says we had 800 fights and we handed out 14 suspensions for a percentage of this, and we collected this much fines and stuff, and boom, you got a report. And that's bureaucracy at its finest, and absolutely doing no good to police the sport.
I cannot agree more.
So, like I said, the bottom line is there's a scientist out there that's got a product that he's going to give you that will make you faster, stronger, whatever it is, and it's not on the list.
Well, here. I mean, here. Let's just prove your point. The Balco guy. Why is his name escaping me?
I'm not gonna remember it either right now. Give me a second, but I'll look him up.
Yeah, he's already got a new gym. He's not a new gym, but like a new performance institute.
Yep.
I mean, he's already got.
Mikey Garcia trained with him for his fight. He went up to 147 pounds.
He looked physically. He looked horrible.
The guy, he didn't do well in that. But hold on a second. What I'm trying to look at. Oh, the place is called Snack. And SNAC, Sports Nutrition Athletic Center, or something like that. And it is run by the guy who was the Balco guy, and that's Conti.
Yeah, Victor Conti. Yeah, I don't know. He's
like
a cartoon character. Yeah.
Yeah. And the bottom line is again, when it comes down to an example there now, and we're talking about Spence Jr. and Porter, both those guys train at an elite level. So that, like you said, if they're in agreement and that stuff tends to balance itself out, I'm okay if both guys are on steroids. I think, right? If both guys are also okay with it, it becomes less of a factor, and it really does become more of a bureaucratic process. At the end of the day, like I said, every fighter wants to train at altitude because it expands your lung capacity and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got to
And
move your
hyperbaric chambers. What
Yeah.
about hyperbaric chambers?
But now the snack facility has a room where they can regulate the oxygen, where you're at 6,000 feet. Okay, now 7,000 feet. All at the touch of a button. All you got to do is get to the building half an hour from your house, not pay and lift your whole training camp over there. So now what advantage is that? Hey, all of a sudden you're taking preparation. The cost of your preparation for a fight goes way down.
Yeah.
You don't have to move 10 people to Bear Mountain, to Big Bear for altitude training anymore. You just go down to the clinic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that an advantage, though? But how do I rate that? Because it's not an injection, so there's nobody who can relate any of that stuff. You know what I mean? So the advantages on the science end are there on multiple layers. How about removing tissue and things like that? But let's get back to Spence Jr.
Let's get back to Spence Jr. Yeah. So I think essentially you've got a football player that knows how to box in Shawn Porter. And when he fought Ugas, phenomenal fight, by the way, there was parts of that fight where he had problems. And the problematic parts was when Ugas was doing high volume and moving forward and pushing Porter back. I mean, the amount of the exertion that he needs to make takes a toll on his cardio. Every time he brushes in, and Spence is like Ugas, but with more output. Like he's as close to Michael Nunn as you're going to get, in the modern era. Long reach, high output, not a lot of knockout power. I mean, although it does exist. He could knock out Mikey Garcia, but you can't count Porter out, but it's the output factor. It's going to go the distance. It's going to go the distance.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, boxing's a sport where, there are different philosophies and different ways to look at fights. And a lot of people are like, they have a common opponent, or whatever. It's like, that doesn't mean that they, one guy won. If A beats B, that it doesn't mean C's going to, none of that. I actually think that applies here. You know what I mean? Keep the pedigree here goes this way. Shawn Porter, a world champion, gets to the point where he's defending his belt at home and loses it to a British fighter named Kell Brook. Kell Brook, at that point, to me, a stud, and absolutely, at that point, the best welterweight in the world. His career, we can discuss at a later date. But Brook came to the States and took the belt from Porter, and I think that speaks of a little bit of Porter's level, that he was a notch below Brook, because Brook had to manage a 12-round fight, and he managed that fight beautifully.
Porter's gotten better since then, though.
Now, but keep in mind now, shift that and give Spence the credit for now. Granted, maybe Brook had gotten banged up and had damage done in the Golovkin fights and other, and stuff like that, and maybe he got a little bit of a damaged version of him. But Spence Jr. went to England to take that belt from him. And that's, I think that the difference there, the advantage that Porter couldn't hold versus the advantage the other guy broke on the other guy, speaks to another tier of a level there. And so now I think you're talking about that Spence Jr. may in fact be 2 levels better than Porter. And I know that that's abstract and talking about it, but I think it is going to show itself to be that clear. Unless Porter gets lucky, his style, and he has gotten better, but he's gotten better on the conditioning side in my book. And he's gotten better on a few things like maybe hand speed and a few things like that. But I don't know that he's gotten to the point where he's going to be working off his back foot much better. And he's anything better than more than just a guy that has to move forward and get inside.
If I had to make a wish, which, few and far between ever come true, I would say that I would wish that Porter would study Jersey Joe Walcott film footage, because he has a lot of the same movement as him in terms of his angles and the way he walks around, and he's so unconventional the way he walks around the ring, much like Jersey Joe Walcott. But his entries and breaking rhythms of his opponents, that's what he needs to tweak. And Jersey Joe was one of the slickest fighters ever to live. And if he could just borrow a few lessons from the few fights that exist on footage, on video footage, I would say it's Jersey Joe Walcott, because he could adapt to that. He could use that style. He could be that style.
It would be interesting to see him. Like I said, his training is already at an elite level. He's an elite fighter. I'm not putting him down.
Hey,
but
dude, I'm letting my dog out. Yeah, I know this is live.
It's all right. So we got, I think what we got though is that, he trains a certain way, and right now conditioning and getting himself into shape and into the best strength-wise and things like that is what he's focused on, and not the adding technique and things like that. And against Spence Jr., he's just, like I said, he's going to find himself, staring up a mountain of technique. Like you said, it starts with the output and the angles he's going to get hit with. It starts with facing a guy that is just calm, cool, and collected, and you have to go in on there. I don't think you're going to get Spence Jr. out of his game plan, not early anyway, not unless he's doing bull rushes. So
can he?
Yeah, that's so Porter has, he's got limitations in how he can fight, and that's a bad way to go into a fight with this guy.
I agree, and I think the type of pressure that Porter puts on, or that Porter puts on, or is capable of, is frightening, But it's only frightening to you or I. Errol Spence doesn't mind that, and he works off his back foot, and he's proven to be good at working off his back foot. So I don't know. I think it's. The plus 575, I think, is probably obviously pretty accurate in regards to Shawn Porter, in regards to odds. Do I think it's a good bet? No.
Yeah. At the end of the day,
bet 100 to win 575. It's still not a good bet, but
it's really throwing 100 away, really.
Okay, but do you want to see the fight?
Yeah, no, I think it'll be. I think it'll be a
phenomenal
fun fight to watch, and I think it's on top of a good card. What do you think in terms of a fight? The finish here in terms of props and things with like, what round is it going to end? Do you think it goes the distance? Do you think?
I bet heavy distance. Yeah, because Errol Spence could knock out 135-pound Mikey Garcia. So that bout's going to distance all day long. 100%.
At the basics, that's at minus 200 right now, that it will go the distance. So you'd be putting up $100 to win 50 back.
I think that's a good bet. Like if I were to put money on that fight, I'd bet heavy on that. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Now, you want to go through some of the other fights?
Where would you put your money?
I'd stay away from this particular fight.
Altogether?
This particular fight, and if I had to, I would gamble on the under 11.5. and go with Spence on the knockout. Now, if you bet the under, it could be either guy with a knockout. It just has to happen before the halfway point of the 11th round. Right now, with that bet at the books, that bet is at plus 175. So you bet $100 and pull back. You go home with 275 in your pocket. So yeah, if I'm risking money, I'd probably go Spence by knockout, even though I agree with you. I think it's probably a full-length fight.
Yeah, it's probably your most intriguing odd right there. Like that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking to see if that moves at all.
Yep, it'll be interesting. We got a couple of days before the fight. I always encourage people to look at the odds after the weigh-ins. That's really when the hardcore guys check in. And obviously, on the day of the fight, you want to bounce around, check the books, and see, if you can get a better number out there. Because sometimes, the disparity between one book and the other will get, depending on who's taking in money, will get there. And, if it's plus 175 at one book, hey, why not take a look and see if you get it at plus 200. It's always better to win more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Who else is on the card that interests you?
Now, we got a couple of world title fights on here. You got Anthony Dirrell taking on David Benavidez, and that's for the 168-pound WBC belt. Dirrell 33, 1-1, obviously from the fighting family, and a lot of pedigree there. Benavidez undefeated at 21-0, and he's the kind of guy that they've been bringing along real well. He's had that world title has been around his waist before, and undefeated at 22 years old. David Benavidez is a guy a lot of people are keeping an eye on.
Has Dirrell ever really blown you away?
Your
pause is very telling.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't want to. I just want to.
I'm a fan of his.
Yeah, I remember his loss to Batyr Jack, and what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to mix him up with his brother, and I do think that Anthony, the brother fighting this weekend, is a notch above on Andrew Dirrell or Andre Dirrell, his brother. His brother was recently in a couple of fights with Uzketegi at the world title level and stuff like that, but he also had a few questionable
wins. Yeah.
And also, medical issues around the Boxing Super Series tournament and him getting knocked out by the European fighter. I don't want to get his name wrong, but, his brother had all those medical questions. And Anthony has avoided a lot of that, which is good. But really, when you consider that Batyr Jack's the biggest name that he's fought, and he lost that fight, he doesn't have the pedigree that his brother does in terms of opponents.
I agree.
So it's one of those where, I'd like to. He's going to have to show me something. And in this fight, he's fighting a guy now 12 years younger, a guy who's got that prospect label and stuff like that. It's time. I hate to put it on him, but this is a fight Anthony Dirrell must win.
It is an absolute must win. And if he doesn't win this one, he's got about 2 more paydays, before he's got to call it a day. I agree. What are the odds on this fight?
And here, what you're looking at is Dirrell at plus 700, Benavidez at minus 1100. So Dirrell is a heavy underdog.
Yeah.
The over-under is at 9.5 with the over at minus 130.
Where's Benavidez training at? Do you know? Do you know where Benavidez is?
Let me see what we can dig up here. Benavidez, 22 years old, and he is fighting out of the Phoenix, Arizona area, and his promoter is Samson Lefkowitz. So Samson is a guy that basically trolls the world looking for talent. When you have his name associated with you at 22 years old, that you've come up with some pedigree there. So, but I as to actually who's teaching him the technique, I don't have that handy.
Yeah, he's one of those guys they're banking on, and this is going to be his coming out party. I truly believe this is going to be his coming out party, and I think Dirrell is the B-side. Not only of this fight, but he was brought in intentionally.
Yeah,
I see where Benavidez is at.
I don't want to sentence Dirrell to journeyman status or anything, because he definitely
he's got a great record. Yeah, he's got a great record.
But he doesn't have their competition level is remarkably similar in recent. Marco Antonio Rubio, J. Leon Love. That's one opponent from each guy's resume. Rogelio Medina on Benavidez's side. Caleb Truax, Dennis Douglin. I believe they both fought. Dennis Douglin, Abraham Hahn. You're really talking about a second tier, no top tier names, on either side. So at this point, I think Benavidez is the guy with the higher ceiling.
Clearly, especially at 22 years old, throwing him against a wolf, like Dirrell. I mean, Dirrell is a wolf.
They call him a dog, right? So there you go. But I think that's the bottom line is he's a dog and he's a good fighter, and that's why he's been on the PBC roster and been a guy who's been getting his fights in on a regular basis. Everything a boxer could ask for, he's been getting that treatment. But at some point, if you're the PBC, either you're taking care of guys, and to a certain extent, they are taking care of, but you can't do that to the full extent. So now here, you got to pay the piper. If he wins this fight, he's going to be in terrific shape, but he's facing a mountain. And at the end of the day, I ask myself this way: for the sport of boxing, who's better as a winner of this fight? And I think that the answer on that one, unfortunately, comes up as Benavidez.
Yeah, and let's just say Dirrell wins this fight. His next two fights after this is going to be murderer's row.
Yeah, it doesn't get any easier, because maybe they'll set up a rematch a couple of fights down the line and stuff if they don't give up on Benavidez. But I like I said, the odds, Benavidez is more of a favorite than.
It's a big stage. This is a big stage for Benavidez. Like they're really attaching a lot to him in regards to that, and they're expecting a lot. And if I don't know,
hats off to the PBC for doing it. I mean, at 22 years old, that's the right time to get. He's undefeated. Gamble, put him in a huge spot, make him perform, and if he doesn't, hey, he's 22 years old. Maybe he blossoms later and stuff. But I'd rather than try it now for the first time than wait until he's 30.
I got to hand it to him, man. I love PBC. I'm a huge fan of what it is they're doing. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
The third fight at 140 pounds, and that 140-pound weight class is becoming more and more interesting.
Congested.
And you got undefeated 24-0 Mario Barrios, and the vacant WBA title is on the line here, and he's taking on Batyr Akhmedov. Akhmedov, somebody you want to make a note of here, at just 7-0. The young, he's 28 years old, but the young Russian coming over with the typical.
Is he from Russia or is he from Uzbekistan?
His birthplace is Uzbekistan, and he's fighting out of Belogorsk in Russia right now in the Crimea.
Do you remember Mohammed Abdullayev out of Uzbekistan?
The name sounds familiar.
He was a stud, man. He was one of my favorite fighters growing up. That Uzbekistan boxing system, I'd love to interview somebody from over there, just in regards to the old school training techniques, from childhood, what they go through. There's got to be an amazing history with tons of stories that people that, from the people that live there that don't like to talk about them. I'd really, really like to kind of, search that area and just get a grassroots of the Olympians and stuff like that there. Anybody coming out of Uzbekistan, I respect immediately, especially at this 7-0. How many amateur fights has he got? What, a couple hundred?
Yeah, I can look it up, but I mean the bottom line there is Uzbekistan comes from the Soviet system. Before the fall of the Soviet Union, those athletes were all Russian athletes, and competing at under those circumstances, you were competing at the highest level. We've seen
for sure,
fighters from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Dagestan. All of southern Russia produces athletes, and if you go over to MMA, the migration is even stronger when it comes down to, like I said, the southern Russians.
Yeah, no, that whole area is just rife with stud athletes for sure.
And what we're talking about between Barrios and Akhmedov right now, you're talking about the closest fight of the evening. Barrios a -155 favorite, Akhmedov +135. Akhmedov with just 7 pro fights, maybe doesn't have enough pro fights to be that on the radar, but to be just a +135 underdog to Mario Barrios speaks volumes, and you got an over-under there of 10.5.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Uzbekistani fighter. I haven't seen any footage on him whatsoever.
Okay, so it'll be interesting to see if he performs on this stage, and if you're willing to take that bet, you can still get him as a slight underdog here. And if he beats Mario Barrios, he probably isn't going to be an underdog for fights.
Yeah, what's Barrios' record right now? What's Barrios' record?
24-0. And I mean, keep in mind the top guys in this weight class are Regis Prograis and Josh Taylor over in England. So you're talking about a literal murderer's row building themselves up at 140 pounds.
So you get 147 that's stacked, 140 that's getting congested, Dude, it's a really good time for boxing right now. And it starts at the heavyweight division.
Yep, and the last fight on the card that I've got odds for, it also comes in the welterweight division. It's a 10-rounder, and I think, we've been giving kudos to the PBC, and these guys deserve credit for this fight because you got Josesito Lopez taking on John Molina Jr. Both those guys, you can look at Spence's record, you can look at Porter's record. These guys have probably fought one or the other or both of those guys because Lopez and Molina Jr. have been putting in the work for the PBC. That's why I like the match, because the PBC is sort of, they're not at the elite level anymore. And rather than keep putting them in there against elite guys and doing that, now they've created a match that really is intriguing. I'd like to see who's going to win on here. And in terms of in the sport books have it a relatively competitive. Lopez, a minus 360 favorite over Molina Jr. Molina Jr. plus 300 right now.
Okay, so do you know how let's just say like a rock band is going on tour, and every once in a while they got to play festivals where there's a bunch of other bands on, and you can have like an amazing classic rock band, and then you got like these up and comers that just shred and destroy before they even walk on, and they're like walking out there like, what just happened here? We got to follow that. And I have a feeling this fight is going to kind of fall into that category. Now, obviously, they're not new and up and comers. They're both guys that have peaked, in my opinion.
Yeah, but they're like the indie bands.
That's going to be a war.
That's the feeling. I agree with you.
That's going to be a war.
It has underrated performers written all over it.
It's got fight of the night. It might have fight of the year candidate written on it, in my opinion.
Well, hopefully, if both guys come in sharp, it's got that kind of potential, and hopefully that's what we get here.
They both like to punch, and they both take them. Especially Molina.
Yeah, and like I said, I like the fight, and as a warm up before 3 title fights, definitely one that you want to take a look at here. Any final words, Mike? We've been looking at the Errol Spence Jr. Shawn Porter card coming to us from the Staples Center on Fox pay-per-view this Saturday, September 28th. A complete review of the main 4 fights and the odds here with special guest Mike Davis. Mike Davis on loan to us from the Fighters Corner, a podcast with a lot of history and interviews across the combat sports. Mike, the guiding light behind that podcast. Go out there and take a look at it on YouTube and all the podcast outlets. Mike, any final words?
No, that's it, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. We're going to have to do this more often.
I appreciate it, Mike, and we will talk soon. Thank you very much, and we'll catch everybody else out there after the fights.